When I was a junior doctor, many years ago, I arrived in a surgical ward and the ward round was on, and the consultant started to talk and he wouldn't look at me. He only looked at the ward sister and he gave all of his directions to the ward sister. And at the end of the ward round, she came over and repeated it all to me, even though I'd been there. And I said, "What's that all about?" And she said, "Oh, he doesn't approve of women doctors, so he only gives his instructions to the ward sister." Now, I would love to think things have changed, and I think they have changed a lot. I'm a working class woman. I went through grammar school and I went to medical school and I became an academic. And in that time, I was supported by men. I was pushed by my father. I was supported by a very strong male professor, and I couldn't have done it without my husband, who cooks dinner for me when I come home at night. The world has changed. We've got a third of women who are MPs now. We've got a lot more women judges, although when I was doing research for this, I was somewhat amazed to find that Scotland has actually got, the only country that's got fewer women judges than Scotland is Azerbaijan. We've got about a quarter of boards in the FTSE 100 have got women on. And at medical school, there are a lot more women. But when you look at the top, it's still men. I was considered so rare as a woman professor in medicine that people used to come and interview me for research projects to try and find out how I got there, to give people advice. I've sat in meetings in medical school where even now, where I've been the only woman apart from the one who sits and takes the minutes. It's been like attending a boys' club. Now, it's not easy being a professional woman. I do think you have to make choices, and I couldn't have done this. I couldn't have done what I've done if I'd have decided to have kids. I've no doubt about that. But within my profession, women still earn less than men. The attitudes are still there. There was a surgeon who caused uproar in Australia last year, a woman surgeon, by saying what women should do is protect their climb up the professional ladder by complying with requests for sex from their seniors. Because if you complain, then you wreck your career. And that's what happens. A woman had complained and she could not be employed again. Women get asked to make the tea. If they argue in surgery, they're asked if it's the time of the month. Now, surgery is the extreme of medicine, but it's the most high status part of medicine. And it's the part of medicine where there's only 11% women. Now, in my work, I work with some of the most deprived areas of the UK. I spent time working with ethnic minority Pakistani women in Manchester. Girls experience sexual abuse at 3 times the rate of boys. It leads to low self-esteem and mental health problems. We know that young women have got lots of problems. We know that they're concerned about their appearance. We know that they're increasingly pressured to have sex in relationships. We've heard about the attitude of gangs to women. Women have more depression and anxiety than men. And when I think about the women I work with in Salford, the deprivation affected them much more. And why was that? Because women are the people that hold families together. They care for the children. They care for the older people. They work part-time. They're worried about being assaulted when they go out in the street. 2 women each week in this country die at the hands of men. Domestic violence is the great unspoken. So I would say there's still real asymmetry of power between men and women, and I think men still have the power. When I look at professions like my own, where more and more women are coming into them, well, then they start to lose their status. I've travelled in Russia. I've met, in Russia, nearly all the doctors are women. Medicine is a very low status profession there. And so the more women in a profession, the more control there is over it, the more regulation. It becomes less attractive to young men. Women find it harder to make it to the top, though, so you can be pretty much guaranteed there'll be men running it. You look at psychology, nearly all women. Look at the top tier, all men. So I think that in my working life, I would say that I have seen instances where when men don't have the power, they do blame women for it. We did quite a lot of work with, as I said, with the Pakistani community, and Men are much less likely to be depressed in the Pakistani community than women. Women are very often, the women we met, were not allowed to go out, were not allowed to visit people, were not allowed to join groups in the community. We must remember that we are predominantly a white audience here. The other cultures, things are somewhat different. When we got a group of depressed men together in that culture, what did they blame their depression on? The women. They've got too much freedom. We need to rein it back in. In abusive relationships, women may be very strong, but they don't realise their strength. And men control them, and they try to regain their power through violence. And that happens throughout. We hear about that almost every week. So I would say that some men are losing out in this society. I have no doubt about that. But I think they still do have the upper hand. I think as women we've worked very hard to where we get, but there's still a lot more to do for those people who are not here, for those people who were not allowed to come out this evening, for those people who have men checking their phones, the people who are not getting into the places where they've got that freedom. I don't think we should rely on men to help us do that either. I think we have to get out there and spend more time being concerned about those of us who are not here.
30
so
seconds.
I'm going to conclude with the immortal words of David Bowie. Nothing stands in your way when you're a boy.